Hello, everybody. My name is Wunjo, and I'm here to deliver the Amtgard V9 Committee's annual report. This is very special for you guys because we have no attached proposals. This is purely an information dump of a lot of the stuff we've learned over the course of the past year as tasked by you guys last year. So please grab some popcorn, sit back, have a drink, and enjoy the presentation. Here we go. Yep. Would you like to say something?
I was just going to ask if you were going to be sharing your report online so I didn't have to take notes and could just
This
watch.
whole slideshow should be available online. However, it was set up to be presented, so some slides don't necessarily have all the details that make them make sense. Does that?
Understood. Thank you.
Yep. I know Vormar has the actual link itself if you wanted to post it somewhere for people to follow along. Beautiful.
Yeah, give me just a moment, but I will do just that.
All right. While we're doing that, let's talk a bit about the report outline that we're going to go through. We're going to start with a brief team overview of who the V9 team is, just in case you weren't aware. We're going to take a few moments to talk about what we've done so far, a summary of the 2020-2021 projects. We're going to spend most of our time talking about where we're at right now, our observations and insights about the state of Amtgard V8. And then finally, we're going to end by looking at where we are going. And this zoom bar at the top of my screen is actually in the way. Does anyone know how to move it? Like to send to my second screen or something? Hide floating meeting controls. Perfect. There we go. Okay. So this is our outline for today. Let's move into me clicking in the screen who we are. So the Amtgard V9 committee has expanded a lot since we started. The core V9 team, as it exists right now, includes myself, Wunjo, Tyler Salvador. I'm the V9 committee lead and currently acting as the director of V9 development. In addition to myself, I am backed by these four glorious individuals. We have Manama, who you just talked to, who is the current V8 rules rep organizer and also a member of our team. We have Cord, who is a previous member of the V8 committee, who is now also sitting on the V9 team to help bridge the link between those two additions. And then we have two very well-versed and well-known rules reps. We have Gorvan and Heron. Now, the five of us hail from the Nine Blades, Rising Winds, Iron Mountains, Golden Vale, and Northern Lights, respectively. But it's not really just us representing V9. While we are the core committee, we are also backed by an extended team that we have built up over the past year. That includes 22 Kingdom appointed rules reps, over 118 active volunteer focus group members, and positive working relationships with the other AI teams and committees, such as the awards team, the website team, diversity inclusion team, as well as all the logistics teams to help us make sure we're getting our message out as quickly as possible. And that leads us here to what we've done over the past year. We're going to go over this quickly because we don't want to waste your time too much. But as you know, the focus of the last year has been these 9 SurveyMonkey surveys. Each of these surveys included comprehensive questions about 1 or 2 topics in the rules of play. We have gone through great lengths to make sure we had accessible distribution via the rules reps, as well as multiple platforms such as Facebook, Discord, Reddit, email, and different methods. So players who were maybe not comfortable taking these surveys in their written form could connect with us and have a proctored test, or even just us hanging around while they take the test to answer questions about the clarity of what we're asking. Across all 9 surveys, we've had an average of 551 responses, with survey number 1 clocking in at a whopping 1,221 responses. This 551 average equals 13.7% of Amtgard's pre-COVID population and 17.3% of our current population. For comparison, most large-scale population surveys are generally aiming to hit 10% of the population as their sample size, so we have cleared that in either case, however you want to compare it. Last note on the surveys is we are aware of a voluntary response bias. That means we didn't randomly select individuals to take our surveys. Instead, we put out the links and said, do it. But one thing that we tried to do, and you've seen these hopefully posted a couple times every month, is these survey engagement charts where we reached out to every kingdom and said, hey, this is how your kingdom is doing engagement wise. We encouraged monarchs and rules reps to offer incentives to get their kingdom to participate so their voices were heard across all the different surveys. Now, I don't want to waste too much time dissecting this because it has been posted multiple times before. But the important thing to know is all the kingdoms that are listed in blue there at the top met our target engagement, which was 15% of that kingdom's total population. Anyone sitting in the yellow got close, and anyone in the red was just a little further behind. The takeaway that I want all the kingdoms and the monarchs and representatives to get from this is not, oh, well, the yellow and the red ones are behind or misrepresented. It's that this is your chance to be more represented in phase 2 and phase 3 and what we're going into as we build V9. Maybe your kingdom wasn't quite active during the pandemic, so we want to see a renewed effort to connect with us as we move on and as we get back on field. So if you have any questions about that, please reach out to me after this presentation. In addition to the 9 SurveyMonkey surveys, we've put together 12 think tank focus groups. These focus groups were basically idea soups where we gathered players of different thoughts and mindsets to help us and stimulate us on the core team to make sure we are not tunnel visioning ourselves and that we are considering all angles. For these focus groups, players could apply to join at the end of the relevant surveys. So for example, the armor focus group recruited people who applied at the end of the armor survey. We sent out at least 2 invitations per topic per kingdom, and we prioritized expertise and diversity in opinions, as well as mental and physical ability when we were selecting these individuals. It has been a demanding but very fruitful endeavor, and even though we're still tweaking some of the knobs and levers to make sure everyone is able to participate fully, we have reaped many great rewards already, and we expect it to continue to do so as we move on. Lastly, we have made sure to establish many ways to connect and stay informed with the V9 team, especially as a member of the general populace. We have set up information dumps on amtgard.com, Facebook, Discord, Reddit, Zulip, just via emailing us directly, as well as our connection points through the rules reps and the diversity and inclusion team. These are all ways that your average Joe can engage with us. And by casting that wide net, we are hoping that we become not the shadow council that is writing the rules of V9, but an actual group of people that the populace can reach out to and chat with us. And that is furthered by the other 2 points on this list. The V9 team has been making video appearances on podcasts and at major events so that people can see us, see our faces, see that we're people who can laugh and talk and kind of humanize the whole process so that they feel more comfortable and confident with us. In addition to that, when we can't be on video, we've reached out for dozens of public AMAs over both text and voice. Your kingdom probably has done one of these or more, either at an event or just in a Facebook thread where your populace could ask questions, and we will answer them with as much information as we have at that time. And lastly, if you haven't seen it, you should check this out. We put together one very, very interesting April Fool's video that fooled quite a few people, and it was very well received. And overall, everything that we've done here is for this, to increase the Amtgard population's confidence in us that we can do the job. So this little chart here, at the end of each survey, we asked our respondents to rate their population, rate their confidence in us. And if you look at ignore the line for a moment, the blue on the top is respondents who gave us a positive rating of some value. The red is negative confidence, and the gray in the middle is people who said they were undecided. As you can see, as time went on, positive confidence went up. In addition to that, the cyan line there is the indication of their actual confidence level. Not only do we say, hey, are you confident or not confident? We said, give us a score. Give us a straight score from 0 to 100. And this is the average response that we got over time. You see it started at 60%, still very confident, and it has only grown from there and is now stabilized at about 70%. So 70% average conference rating, 70% of respondents just have confidence in general. To me, that's a big win. And as we move forward, as I continue putting on these reports for everyone, I hope that that can only grow. And I'm happy with it. So I hope you, seeing this now 1 year on, are happy with the results that we have put forward. And if you're not, hopefully this next section changes that, because we're into the big meat and potatoes part of this presentation. We're now going to look at where we're at, the observations and insights that we have taken from this year of surveys about Amtgard V8. Now, brief outline, we're going to look mostly at the major issues and satisfaction points with the current edition of play. Specifically, we're going to look over how much change is wanted, armor, monsters, roleplay and questing, support and guidance, clarity, and then inclusion and accessibility. Now, I understand we are on a time limit and I could talk for days about all this, so I'm going to try to be brief. If I'm going too fast, I apologize. You can always connect with us later and we can re-explain stuff. But if I did go into detail, we would be here all night. So with that as well, please hold all questions until the end of the presentation. Thank you. So first thing we're going to talk about, and this is one of the biggest questions we get from everyone about V9, is how much is V9 going to change from what we have now, what we know now with V8? And to get a grasp of what the population wanted, or more specifically what they'd be comfortable with, we asked them to tell us how much change you would like to see. And in survey 1, our very first survey, we presented them with the two options on the left. Do you want to see major changes where it's basically a new edition, out with the old, in with the new? Or would you like us to examine and upgrade V8? Now, the responses we got from that were, we felt that they could break down a little more. So I know there's no chart on the screen in the middle right now, but I'm going to talk about the 4 options on the right, because that's how we ended up breaking it down 1 year later in survey 9. So you can see we broke it down into still major changes. We added moderate, mild, and minor. And these was worded a little bit differently in the survey itself. I've condensed it here to help your understanding now as you're watching this report. So a minor change is basically no change. It is just little clarity and fixes to tweak the system in very, very small ways. A mild change would be where we expand on the existing, where we take a class and we maybe add a couple new things, but we stay within the general realm of what people are used to. It's an expansion. The moderate changes is where we start thinking outside of the box. That's where we're going to start plugging on new arms and googly eyes and introducing whole new mechanics and systems. And then major changes, once again, is out with the old. That's your, hey, what's there is not working, we want to replace it. And now I'm going to show you the charts. These are the results we got. So on the left, you can see survey number 1, and on the right, you see survey number 9, almost a year later. And thankfully, we can see that the 2 red sections are very similar 1 year later, which kind of reinforces that our population samples are still very similar. And then the green section, the examine and upgrade, breaks down into what you see here on the right. Notably, we can take away from this that overall, in the grand scheme of V9, populations are generally more leaning towards moderate or mild changes. There's a big chunk that wants major, and there's a small chunk that wants it to kind of stay the way it is. So if I were to tell you right now, how much change are you going to expect in V9? I'd say moderate change. And what that exactly is going to mean is going to be the result of our research and our continued development going forward. But in order to give you a little glimpse of specifically what is likely going to change, we asked players to rate a series of topics on how much you think those specific topics could change. And I know it's very small on your screen right now. Don't worry, we're going to blow it up in a second. But this chart here is organized from left to right in the preference for minor changes. So you can see that blue bar starts high at the left and then goes down as we go to the right. And what I really want you to focus on is the leftmost columns and the rightmost columns here. So on these left 4 columns here, these are areas where respondents were generally more satisfied with the rules as is. Things in these columns are likely to stay similar to what they are now. Most of these almost have 50% of the respondents saying that they would prefer that we just do clarity fixes. Any changes will likely be either quality of life or targeted changes, like replacing a stereo in a car. You're not junking your car, you're not doing any major things, you're just like, this thing has been a problem, I'm going to fix that. And from left to right, those topics are the core combat rules, sitting at almost 70% of people saying, hey, they're cool with it as is. Melee weapon construction, arrow construction, and projectile construction. And I know most of you hearing those categories can think of one or two targeted changes that they need, but overall, I'm sure you can agree, they're generally in a good spot from an overall mechanic perspective. Now, on the flip side, and the focus of the rest of this discussion, we're looking at these final 5 on the right. And these are topics where the respondents were generally less satisfied. These areas are where we are more likely to see changes. And I can confirm that this sentiment tracks with the other data that was gathered in the topic-specific surveys. The topics here will be the focus of our field research and testing as we move through 2021 and 2022 to see what we need to do to get these numbers basically back up to where people are happy with them. So from left to right, these categories are armored combat, class customization, armor construction, the monster class, and questing and role play. So there you can see the whole chart there if you want to take a snippet. But in addition to all of this, we've noted one more thing. There are 3 major game-wide issues that kind of draw a line through all the different topics. They're consistently brought up in our open responses and in our just regular questions as problems that players want to see addressed. And those 3 major game-wide issues are safety, clarity or ease of understanding, and inclusion or accessibility. And we're going to touch on all 3 of these as we move through the presentation, but I just wanted to highlight the bigger picture right now. Okay, so let's take a closer look. We're going to start with armor, specifically combat and construction of armor. At the top of the screen right now, you will see those 2 bars for armor and armor construction pulled out of our how much change do you want. And when we look at this chart, we can see that the majority agrees that there should be change, but everyone is really split on how much change. The armored combat bars are almost completely quartered into sections of 25%, and armor construction is still very close as well, with a little bit extra on the major change side of things. So what did we do? We went into our data, we went to our armor surveys, and these are the issues we were able to identify from those results. So the issues with armored combat we have noted are issues with hit tracking, specifically in swirling melees. When a player is in combat with even just one player, but usually with multiple players, arrows, projectiles, people from behind, different types of attacks, armor breaking, ancestral armor, all sorts of things. When you're wearing armor and lots of stuff is happening to you at once, it becomes very hard to track your armor values. In addition to that, issues with magic armor, just as a whole, are consistently being brought up. And finally, the counterplay systems, including armor breaking, ancestral armor, and mending, especially as it applies to both magic armor, ancestral armor, or the 2 of them combined, which is a major issue that people constantly tell us about, even in questions that have nothing to do with those topics. On the other side, when we look at armor construction, the issues we've identified are the allowable materials and styles of armor that can be used to create Amtgard legal armor that awards points. In addition to that, we have 3 different types of accessibility: the physical ability to wear the different types of armor that are required in Amtgard, the financial ability to buy armor that is actually worth something to let them play their class, and on the flip side of that same coin is the skill-based requirement, or the ability to craft armor. And those 2 kind of go hand in hand, because right now you need either one or the other, and if you don't have either, it makes the accessibility of Amtgard very difficult. And all of that is underlined by inconsistent rating across parks and kingdoms. Numerous respondents wrote to us and highlighted the fact that they can go out of their way to follow the rules to make armor with the specific materials, the specific styles, that it feels comfortable for them to wear, that they can afford, or that they have the time to build. And then when they go to one field, it's worth 3 points, and then another field it's worth 2 points, and another field it's worth 4 points. And it makes it very hard when you're planning all this out, when you're putting your hard-earned money or time or skill into this, to then have it be subject to whoever's judging its emotions at the time. So those are really the issues with armor and armored combat and construction that we have identified here. But I want to focus on this quote for a second. This is a quote by Socrates. I think, maybe, I grabbed it from the internet. The secret of change is to focus all of your energy not on fighting the old, but on building the new. And what that really means to us is we want to design for those who are with us now and those who have yet to dive in. A big concern from a lot of armor wearers when we talk about changes to armor is they don't want their current investment, how much money they've put in, how much time they put in, their identity to be changed because we shift the rules and leave them outside what is considered meta or, viable in the game. But at the same time, we also want to consider the new players who haven't come in yet, who haven't spent money, who haven't learned a crap yet, to make sure that they can get into the game. And if they pick a class that has armor, that they can get those armor points going as fast and as easy as possible. So we're really trying to harmonize the enjoyment of these two groups and kind of bring them closer together. And as the V9 team, we understand that this type of game is always going to be an iteration of itself. And if we can't get the perfect solution right now, we're going to get some of the way there. We're going to plant those seeds, and maybe in a decade from now, V10 can harvest those plants and make something good out of it. And you're going to see me come back to this over and over through the course of this discussion. So let's move on to the monster class. Monster is very similar to armor in a lot of ways. First off, we have the chart here. How much change do we want to see with monster? Well, all right, everyone's split again. Now, notably, we have much more opinion on the major change side of things, but it's still pretty balanced across all levels. So we dove into the data, and here's something we found that is interesting. We asked, how often does your park allow monster to be played as a regular player class? And by regular player class, I don't mean you're an NPC. I mean, you show up, they're like, hey, what class are you playing in the battle game today? And the dude goes monster, and you're like, cool, and they're allowed to do it. So this chart here shows us that just over 50% of Amtgard is allowed, or 50% of respondents, say that they are often or always allowed to play monster as a regular player class. About a quarter of them said that it's somewhat often, right? Somewhere in the vicinity of a coin flip. And then another quarter say that monster is basically a special treat, not often, rarely, or never. And that's very interesting because it shows us that the whole ecosystem of monster is very much split. Here's some data about the monster class that we pulled out just to support this. 13% of respondents identified themselves as a monster main. And by main, I mean that's the class they choose to identify with. It is their fantasy avatar in our game. It is the class that they play and love most often. So 13%. To put that into more perspective, 12% of respondents identify as an archer main. So monster is more popular by 1 percentage point than one of the standard classes. Of that 13% of monster mains, 30% of them don't play at parks that regularly allow them to play their class. So that means someone has went, monster is what I like, monster is who I am, I'm going to show up to field, and I have to ask to see if maybe today I'm allowed to play that class. And that's really the core of the issues we've identified with monster. So as you can see right there at the top of my list, there's inconsistent of levels of acceptance for the monster class in this game. And that's all the accumulation of these following points, which is the lack of proper development or balancing, which is a lot of the reasons why people say, no, we don't want to deal with monsters. Confusion between unofficial and official documents, such as homebrew battle tomes, all the Amtgard X stuff, someone just writing up something that looks professional on a piece of paper. We have confusion regarding non-rulebook abilities and effects, stuff like, many-legged or thick skin, lair, altered effects. All these extra abilities make it so that game runners are very hesitant to let a monster in, especially if you have newer players, because you're putting that extra knowledge burden onto the rest of your players in order to allow that monster. And that stems from the very little official support for the inclusion of monsters in the rulebook. The actual rulebook right now has one paragraph talking about monster, and it basically says, yeah, it exists, get permission, there's another book for it, and that's it. There's no support for how to properly do that in an official context, so everyone just kind of does their own thing with it. And this division between acceptance and not acceptance has really created two different worlds, the PC side and the NPC side. The NPC side has got it nice, because they're the ones who are showing up for scenarios and quests and specific areas where they're like, hey, we need a Minotaur. Who wants to play a Minotaur? And someone will be like, oh yeah, I want to be a Minotaur. And they get to play it. So they're opting in when the slots are there. PC side, on the other hand, is them trying to express themselves. And it's a lot harder to get to that angle and to do it in that avenue, despite, like we can see on this chart, a little more than 50% of respondents saying that's the way it is at their park. So just like armor, we have to acknowledge that monster players are people too, and we need to design for those who are with us now and those who have yet to dive in. These monster players, they exist. They're here in this game. They have devoted money to their garb, to maybe their face paint, their characters, their whole personas, and it would be unjust of us to adjust the rules to push them farther into the darkness. So we cannot make any solutions right now because we are still doing a lot of research, but what we know for sure is that monsters deserve to be supported by this rule set. And that's pretty much the extent of what we're talking about for a lot of the other topics in here. By supporting monster, we not only make sure monster players can continue to do what they want to do and be happy, but new players who are coming in now can more smoothly coexist with the monster environment. They can pick up monster and they don't have to feel like they're picking the wrong class just because they picked monster and okay, every other day you get to play it. And this links to roleplay and questing as well. Let's look at the chart here for roleplay and questing at the top. This should be fairly similar to you by now. We have a pretty even split. You can see that the minor change side, the blue section, is actually the lowest of all the responses. So this is the one where people feel need to change the most. But we have this big chunk at 32% in the mild change section. So what does this mean? Well, okay, we looked at the data. We asked, are you likely to participate in roleplay activities? And 73% of respondents said they were either likely or very likely to participate in roleplay activities. The dark blue there is very likely, by the way. Then we asked, okay, do you enjoy roleplay in Amtgard? And 80% of players said that they enjoyed roleplay in Amtgard. That blue is people saying they love it. Over 50% say they love it. And then the lighter blue is just saying, hey, yeah, we like it. So we got 73% of respondents saying that they're likely to participate, 80% saying that they enjoy it. So what's the problem? Well, we found this. We asked, is roleplay well supported? And only 27% of respondents thought that roleplay was well or very well supported in Amtgard. And that's the big thing. This is the biggest part of the issues with roleplay and the following topics. The lack of support means that players are making up their own rules to roleplay in Amtgard. Everyone is taking their own custom systems and just using Amtgard's combat mechanics to support their own custom roleplay systems. This leads to inconsistent rules and quality between parks and organizers. You can't just go from one park to another, especially one kingdom to another, and expect roleplay to work the same way. Now, don't get me wrong, this can produce great results with the right people at the helm, but can also completely stagnate when those individuals are not present or available. In fact, 7% of respondents said that their home park does not run roleplay activities at all. So the big takeaway from this is respondents want more support. guidance and tools for organizers, PCs, and NPCs to actually run the role play in an official capacity, something that feels consistent across the game. And this is not just a role play issue either. Let's look at this chart here. We asked, which of these activities do you regularly participate in? 85% of our respondents said that they regularly participate in class battles. 73% for role play, 60% ditch, 57% one-on-one fighting, 53% say militia. And then on the right half, we have all the creators and the organizers and the game runners. 39% say they run pre-made games, something where they just take the game out of the book and run it exactly as it's presented. 34% say they run role play. 25% say they run custom games that are tailored or tweaked or adjusted for the environment, and 25% Reeve. That is a quarter of the population there that runs those games in a custom way or Reeves. And everyone on the right side of that line is responsible for the enjoyment and the fun of the people on the left side. So just like roleplay, the current game rules lean heavily on our small base of volunteer organizers and Reeves to coordinate the execution of the game and actually make it fair and fun. Just like a deck of cards, right? You get the deck of cards, the cards can do a bunch of things, but if you don't know anyone who knows a game to play with the cards, it's just a pile of cards. When an activity fails, the fault is often placed on these organizers and Reeves, yet there is very little official support to help these essential volunteers succeed. How many times have you heard an irate player complain about unbalanced teams or poorly designed quests and activities? Supporting information and guidance for these organizers and Reeves was the most backed request across all our surveys. All right, 58% of respondents asked for better support when balancing teams. 52% asked for better support reaving mid-game conflicts. 49% for creating custom games and quests. 40% for updated and expanded example games. 40% for support resolving common misconceptions and rules disputes. Now, to put some context to those numbers, in our other surveys, the most unified support for specific topics, specific changes, was 40%. In all our other surveys, 40% was the most unified people were. And here I have 5 things all to do with supporting our organizers that are above 40%. So that shows how much our population, at least from the respondents sample that we have, cares about this particular issue. Because at the end of the day, our rules of play are only half the battle. The other half is red lasers and blue lasers. Sorry, no way. It's organizers and Reeves. And it's up to us to support them properly. We need to set them up for success. Otherwise, we don't have a game. We just have writing in a book that seems cool and people who want to play it, but nothing actually going on. And that doesn't stop with just our organizers and our Reeves. Setting people up for success also bleeds to our players. And this is where we're going to start talking about clarity and ease of understanding in the game. Here's some interesting facts. 36% of respondents reported a noteworthy frequency of mental overload during class gameplay. The red and the yellow there are very often and often of how often you experience mental overload during class gameplay. And when I say mental overload, I mean that the stuff you're required to think about while you're playing a game gets to the point where there is so much that stuff gets lost or you can't process it. And this leads to things like sloughing or screwing up a spell or literally analysis paralysis where you just stop. Your body just goes like, oh, what thing should I sacrifice to keep running? Oh, we'll do movement. And you just stand there and just trying to get back on track and catch up. It's like real life lag. In addition to this, 43% of respondents reported auditory overload. There is so much sound that they can't hear everything. 30% of respondents reported a noteworthy frequency of struggling to keep up with melee combat. And this isn't just class combat either. We asked about one-on-one tournament combat as well, and we got 30% there as well. Just keeping up with the amount of hits and the speed of combat, 30% of people are struggling. This one's not so much with mental overload, but 31% of respondents also reported physical overload. And this isn't just pushing yourself to the point of exhaustion. This is doing the bare minimum required to play the game, running back and forth, throwing, swinging your swords, wearing armor, holding a shield, carrying an objective. 31% of people felt that that was too much for them. So, what are the issues that we've identified with clarity? Well, the big one that I'm sure you can see is that 1 in 3 respondents are overloaded. And this impacts the execution of the game as a whole, right? Amtgard doesn't have a processor or a computer running the internals to make sure everything works. Our players are these disconnected meat processors with their brains. And if 1 in 3 of our brain processors are overloaded, that means we're running at a reduced efficiency, and that is going to cause all sorts of problems. And some of this stems not only from just the sensory overload, but also the fact that many of our rules have been identified as being poorly written or counterintuitive, making them much harder to learn and even harder to recall in the middle of an active combat. Going even deeper, gray areas are notoriously regulated by unsupported volunteers. This ends up with these gray areas being resolved differently from park to park, leading to confusion. And I'm sure everyone is aware of this, but the official clarification ecosystem right now is a bit of a mess. It is very hard for players to find out the answer to how is this supposed to work, because we have this disorganized Facebook page that's very hard to search, and everyone and their mother is giving opinions, and it's just not working. And this leads to lots of problems with clarity that the V9 team is definitely hoping to solve. Here's a little addendum to this. We asked everybody, what is important to you in the game? And we got this. 98% of players think that honor and sportsmanship is important to them. That's 3% more than fun. 95% of people said fun is the most important or is important. 89% said cooperation and teamwork. 84%, there's our clarity and understanding. And then we drop down a bit to personal growth and small victories. And there's more to this chart, but I want to highlight these top 4 right now, because even though clarity and understanding is the 4th one in this chart, these first 3 are significantly impacted by clarity and understanding. Your perception of honor and sportsmanship is going to change if the people you're looking at are overwhelmed. If someone is overwhelmed and they can't register a hit, it's more likely that other players are going to assume malice, because that's just the way stupid humans work. And they're going to think, oh, that person is sloughing, not that person is literally lagging behind the rest of the game. Greater understanding means more people can stay up with the game, means more people have time in their brain to act sportsmanshiply, that's a word, we'll go with it, and just promote better positive attitudes on the field. I shouldn't need to explain how having a better clarity and understanding of the game and not overloading can help promote fun. You're going to have less fun if you're standing around completely fried than if you are fully engaged in the game. And then this is one that is often not really fully understood what it is understood, which is the cooperation and teamwork. A lot of complaints we receive are about people wanting more cooperation and teamwork, that their teams should work together. They want more ways that people can work together. But when players are suffering from an overload, communication, just being aware of your team and being able to communicate with them, that's one of the first things to go out the window. You can't talk and strategize with your friends if you don't have the mental space to even think about it in the first place. I'm going to take a second and have a little drink of water here. So I'd like you all to guess right now on this chart, where do you think winning ended up, winning overall? I heard this reference in a previous conversation that, you know, a lot of people come to have fun, but at the end of the day, they care about winning a bit. On this chart, we did have winning, and winning ended up in dead last. Only 24% of players care about winning overall. You can see that 68% more players actually care about personal growth and these small victories, such as winning a single little engagement or impacting a objective in some positive way. They just want those little takeaways. They don't necessarily care about the overall prize. And that's pretty interesting. But really, like I've been saying, This is all part, getting the clarity under wraps is how we are going to set our players up for success. And that is how people are going to have more fun, be more sportsmanly, and really just have a better Amtgard experience. So let's get to this topic. This is a topic that I'm not even going to try to compare or try to say anything that compares to what Annette said earlier. I think Lightning encapsulated the issues with the gender divide pretty solidly in her earlier discussion, but I'm going to show some statistics here so you can see. So first of all, gender. We did a bunch of demographic information, and we've managed also to find two other major gender surveys in Amtgard, and we've harmonized them together to create this chart here. So this is a approximation of what we think the true shape of Amtgard is based on these three surveys. So we have V9 survey number 1, which has 1,221 responses. Awards committee survey from July 2020, which had 778 responses. And the Garb Standards survey from 2015, which had 1,119 responses, which up until V9 survey number 1 was the most responded survey in Amtgard. So we've got 2 of the top demographic surveys in Amtgard, and then another one that still has a large chunk. And this is what we came up with. 69% men in Amtgard, 22% women, 5% non-binary or other gender, and then the remainder is unstated. And for comparison, I put together this chart. So this is a percentage of men in other comparable hobbies based on available data. And the reason it's percentage men and not anything else is because not all of these had a split for women and non-binary or also unstated. So we're just going to focus on men here for this angle. And I want to draw your attention specifically to the red highlighted targets. You see LARP is there. There was a census done in 2014 with tens of thousands of LARPers from across the world. And the results of that came that LARPing in general sits around 62% men. And North America specifically also pulled around the same with about 60 to 62% men. But Amtgard is sitting there at 69%, and that's just not good. So while the issue of the gender divide in Amtgard is very much a social and cultural thing, there are things we can do from the V9 and the rulebook side of things to start moving in a better direction. Because at the end of the day, there are women in this game. I'm sure most of you are aware, women play this game. And like I've mentioned before, we need to design for those who are with us now and those who have yet to join. And when it comes to women and non-binary individuals, this is where we get the survivor bias, where the women that are playing our game right now, they're the ones that were able to put up with what is here, with the current existing features, right? We don't have the ability to poll everyone who joined the game and went, nah, and left. So we have to put a lot more effort into figuring out how can we make this game as a whole more appealing to members of minority genders so we can get that number to at least 62%, and if not, even further. And that brings us to this, which is difficulty and disability as well, because this is the other side of that inclusion coin. We asked players, hey, do you experience any long-term difficulties or disabilities when you're trying to play Amtgard that prevents you from playing this game to the capacity that you would like to play it, to the point where you feel, fulfilled with your experience? And 19% of players said yes, and 6% chose to remain unstated. And it shouldn't take a rocket scientist to assume that probably a good chunk of that unstated is also in the yes column. But for the purposes of this, we're going to just highlight this 19% here, because we also asked them, hey, if you said yes, what is the cause of that difficulty or disability? And we got this breakdown here with the top 5 being pain. This is either constant pain or a sensitivity issue, mental health, mobility, endurance, and strength. And then if you look down a bit, I also want to highlight learning there at 7%. So learning disabilities are often coupled with reading and writing hindrances, and that can affect whether or not people did this survey in the first place. So that number for learning could likely be a little bit higher than where it is now. but adapting for the learning people is clearly something that we want to focus on with the clarity. When it comes to pain, mental health, mobility, endurance, strength, and even everything else on this list, knowing these numbers when we're putting together V9 helps us focus on the player base that may be having the hardest time, so we can get that bar down to where, if we can't get it to where it's just accessible to them right at the start, we can make sure that we write the rules in such a way that they're easily adaptable to provide accommodations and to encourage accommodations to the players and the organizers at their parks. This is the supporting organizers supporting Reeves by helping them help us help those with difficulties and disabilities, and just make the game more enjoyable as a whole. Because at the end of the day, right, this is a game. And again, this one quote, we have to design for those who are with us now and those who have yet to dive in. There are people who are playing this game who have difficulties and disabilities, and this is their hobby. This is their life. This is their fantasy. This is their escape, right? To them, it might not be a super competitive sport like some people. To them, it might be the place they go to hang out with their friends and pretend to be a wizard with 40 teleports or whatever. And we want to make sure that however these individuals want to keep playing, we make the game feel comfortable for them, and not just them. Just like I said, with the women and non-binary populations, we also have all the people that came to this game, that wanted to play this game, that left, that we will never know why they left. So we have to talk to those who stayed and kind of extrapolate and figure out what can we do to make this game more appealing as a hobby for those who have yet to dive in. So when they show up and go, can I play? They find something that is encouraging and accessible, because at the end of the day, Amtgard wants to grow. That's the point, right? We are a game. We want more players playing the game so we can grow and grow and grow. And inclusion and accessibility is the best way that we can help grow those numbers. Whew. All right. Swerving back to a brief note on levels, classes, and customization. If you remember way from the start, class customization was one of the issues that was at the far right of the what should change bar. Now, we're not going to be talking about any of that today, specifically because classes are the focus of our phase 2 of surveys. That's what we're going to be talking and surveying about after this meeting. And because classes are the way that most people engage with this game, that's how they place themselves in the game. They choose a class, it's their main, it's their avatar, it's their fantasy. We want to make sure that we do those right from an emotional level as well as a mechanical level. So we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into our surveys on that regard, and we're going to group all the classes and levels and customization into its own report at a later date. Speaking of a later date, let's talk about where we're going, our plans for 2021, 2022, and beyond. So here's our projected timeline for the future. This timeline is, of course, subject to change, and all listed initiatives are intended to start after the GOTC of the stated year. So this first item, that is slotted for 2021, which is right now, we will be starting into this after, I guess, today. So what we're looking for in the next year is field research and the aforementioned class surveys. And by field research, I mean we're going to finally be going beyond this pandemic, getting on the field and getting some things tested and researched on the ground. We're going to be sending out the exact method that we're going to be doing this is still up in the air. But the point is, it's not necessarily play testing so much as it is us looking at the issues we've identified and kind of stress testing different angles to see what is the best way to approach these different problems. So we won't be testing solutions so much as we're testing the bounds of what is feasible, if that makes sense. After that, however, the next year, that is where we're going to enter limited play testing, where we are going to have an alpha version of V9 that we will provide to specific parks for them to try and get feedback for. This will be a very, very rough version of the rule set, and we will be continuing with our ongoing field research as well. If all that goes good, by 2023 is where we will present our open playtest of the beta rules, and that will be the big here is V9, basically. Go out and play it and let us know what's wrong so we can tweak it over the next year. At the 2024 GOTC, that is where we will have the final version of V9 to present to you all, to be voted. as the next official edition of Amtgard. And if it is accepted, that is where we will move on to support the adoption and the full changeover so that all the kingdoms are using that rule set. And lastly, if it is accepted and we move on, the year after launch, we will be, the V9 team will be sticking around in some form to ensure that we have post-launch care for the next year. So as the meta settles, as people go from learning the game to abusing the game, we're around here to make sure we can make the tweaks so that the game balance exists in the way we want it to going forward before we pass off the reins to whatever rules team will exist beyond us. The immediate question you might be asking, is this any different from the one that we've been telling everyone and posting? No. All these dates are exactly as we projected last year. The only difference is we've changed the names a little bit. So 2024 is still our projected release date for V9 as a whole. Now, I understand that in the course of this presentation, I did not provide a lot of solutions. I didn't say a lot of what we are going to be doing. It's all very nebulous and very fluffy. And I wanted to leave you guys with our commitments, what we wanted to do, because we've looked at all this data, we've gathered all this information, we've talked to hundreds and hundreds of people, and we've revised our mission statements and our vision and our values to really help you understand what is going to be our guiding light and our purpose as we move forward with V9. So right off the bat, our mission statement for the V9 team is the following. And I want to put an asterisk here saying this is not Amtgard as a whole's mission statement. This is the mission statement for the V9 development team. So here it is. Our mission is to provide Amtgard with a safe, accessible, and adaptable system of play that is simple to learn but challenging to master. We want to engage passions, empower creativity, encourage camaraderie, and above all, promote enjoyable experiences regardless of who you are, where you're from, or what you can do. Now that's all well and good, but it is still very rather nebulous. So I want to go in here really quick and we're going to talk about our vision and our values. Now, a vision statement is the tagline of the product. Amtgard's vision statement right now is live the dream. And so we wanted to make sure that the V9 team had something that was equally evocative, that you could read it and know exactly what our intentions were with the definition or with our development, of V9. So we came up with this: all for fun and fun for all. And not only do we feel that that immediately evokes the quintessential vision of how you should feel when you're at Amtgard, but I don't know about you guys, a lot of people just had an immediate smile on their face when I pitched this idea to them. So I can't see everyone right now. I hope you're smiling. You on YouTube, I hope you guys are smiling as one. This is all for fun, fun for all, our vision for V9. And conveniently, it breaks down into two halves. On the left side, we have all for fun, which tells us that our rules should serve the greater goal of creating enjoyable experiences. It is all for fun. On the other side, fun for all says that our rules should enable everyone to have fun in their own way. It is fun for all. And under these, we have also established our values, our guideposts, and our core beliefs that will either forward all for fun or fun for all in some way and help us make decisions for the rest of the rules. So number one is safety. Safety builds trust. We want to prioritize safety so the players can focus on fun, not fear. Next up, we have simple concepts, infinite potential. We want to strive for this edition to be easy to learn and intuitive while still empowering creativity and mastery. Like I said before, we want to set our players and our organizers up for success. We want to minimize confusion and maximize clarity to help players focus on playing the game, not the rules. And lastly, on this side, we have longevity is key. We want to be as fun on the first day as the 500th. And I know that seems like a tall order. In fact, a lot of the things here maybe seem like wishful thinking, but I want you all to know that these are not promises. These are our aspirations. We're going to strive as best as we can to hit these markers. And while we may fall short, I hope you can see that merely striving for it will put us on a better path towards a positive V9. On the fun for all side, we have everyone can be extraordinary. We want to prioritize inclusivity with accessible rules and guidance to help individuals engage and participate in a way that is fulfilling to them. We want to have a commitment to community. We want to promote camaraderie, cooperation, compassion, and respect, or at least as much as the written rules can do. Like was talked about earlier when it comes to written rules influencing culture and vice versa, we do think that by setting up and promoting and encouraging and incentivizing these types of positive actions within the rules, that the culture may start to follow our lead as well. And last, but certainly not least, something I've said over and over again in the course of this presentation, while this is a new chapter, it is still the same Amtgard story. And we want to design for those who are with us now and for those who have yet to dive in. Amtgard is my game, it is your game, it is a game for people who've dedicated their entire lives to it, and it is the game for the people who haven't even heard what it is yet. And that is really, at the end of the day, what is driving us in our development of V9. Thank you. On behalf of the entire Amtgard V9 committee, myself, Wunjo, Manama, Cord, Gorvan, and Heron, thank you for watching this presentation. I hope this was informative, and if at the end of the day you came away with a little more understanding and maybe, just maybe, a little bit more confidence as well. Thank you.